The first scream didn't come from a patient. It came from the charge nurse. The glass doors of Mercy Harbour Medical Center slid open with a mechanical sigh, and a stretcher rolled in, carrying a man whose chest was already losing the fight. Blood soaked through the sheets, dark and fast, pooling onto the linoleum. The paramedic's voice cracked as he shouted vitals that were already outdated. Too slow. Too late. Someone yelled for Trauma 1. Someone else froze, and standing 3 steps back from the chaos was Claire Nolan. 34 years old, brown hair pulled too tight. Scrubs a shade too faded, she held a clipboard against her ribs like a shield. Her eyes followed the blood, not the man. The way it spread. The way it smelled metallic and warm. She didn't move. "Claire, what are you doing?" snapped Susan Whitaker, 58, charge nurse, voice sharp enough to cut glass. Susan's jaw was clenched, her eyes already tired of the night that had barely begun. "If you're going to stand there, at least don't block the hallway." Claire flinched and stepped back, nearly colliding with a supply cart. "Sorry," she said. "Too soft. Always too soft." Dr. Matthew Reed burst through the trauma bay doors, white coat unbuttoned, tie crooked. 47. Board certified. Untouchable, at least in his own mind. He took one look at the patient and swore under his breath. Jesus Christ. Who triaged this? The paramedic opened his mouth. Reed cut him off. "Never mind. Get him on the table, and someone get Nolan out of here. I don't need her freezing up tonight." Claire felt the words land before she understood them. Not loud, not dramatic. Worse, casual, like a decision already made. She turned away as they rushed past, the stretcher clipping her knee. Pain flared. She didn't react. Down the hall, a television murmured about rising healthcare costs and budget hearings in Washington. The volume was too loud. The lights buzzed. Somewhere, a heart monitor flatlined, then screamed. Susan watched Claire retreat toward the nurse's station, shoulders folding inward. For a brief second, something crossed Susan's face. Doubt. Then it hardened. "Get it together," she muttered, not sure who she was talking to. Claire stopped at the end of the corridor. She stared at her reflection in the dark glass. Pale, ordinary, invisible. And beneath the hum of machines and voices, something else stirred. Not fear. Restraint. By 10:27 in the evening, Mercy Harbour had settled into its familiar rhythm of controlled exhaustion, the kind that pretended to be calm, the kind that broke without warning. Claire Nolan sat at the nurse's station, relabeling IV bags that did not need to be relabeled. Her hands were steady. Too steady for someone everyone believed was rattled. She wrote slowly, deliberately, as if each letter was an anchor. Across from her, Susan Whitaker leaned against the counter, rubbing the bridge of her nose, reading a staffing email for the 3rd time. "They cut another 2 floaters," Susan said, not looking up. "Administration says we can absorb the load. Like bodies don't bleed heavier at night." Claire nodded, eyes on the label. "They always say that." Susan glanced at her then. A pause. You okay after earlier? I'm fine. The answer came too fast. Before Susan could respond, the radio on the wall crackled. Static first, then a voice stripped of patience. Mercy Harbor, this is Unit 7. We're inbound. 2-minute ETA. 1 male, mid-40s, altered mental status, possible head trauma. He's restrained. Barely. Susan straightened. Trauma 2, she snapped into the mic. Then quieter. Why is it always barely? The automatic doors at the ambulance bay rattled as the wind pushed against them. Rain streaked the glass sideways. Claire felt it before she heard it. A vibration, low, heavy, like something large shifting its weight. The doors flew open, not slid. Flew. The stretcher came in fast, but the man on it was already half off, wrists straining against leather restraints that creaked under pressure. He was big. Not tall big. Dense big. Muscles packed tight under a soaked jacket, jaw clenched, eyes wide and unfocused. Blood streaked his temple, but he didn't blink. "Where is it?" he barked, voice raw, scraping the air. "Where did you move it?" "Sir, stay with me," the paramedic said, breathless. "You're in a hospital." The man laughed. Short, sharp, wrong. He surged upward, snapping one strap clean. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Security rushed in too late. The first guard reached for his arm. The man twisted, fast, and the guard hit the floor hard enough to knock the breath out of the room. Screams rose. Chairs scraped. Susan swore. Dr. Reed backed up, hands raised, color draining from his face. Claire didn't move. Her eyes locked onto the man's hands. The way his fingers flexed, the way his weight shifted before each step. She whispered, barely audible. "This is about to go very bad." The man moved like a storm that had learned how to aim. He didn't swing wildly. He advanced. One step, then another. Each footfall deliberate, measured, as if the chaos around him was irrelevant. The broken restraint dangled from his wrist, leather snapping against bone. His eyes weren't empty. They were fixed on something no one else could see. "Back up!" Susan shouted, voice cracking for the first time in years. "Everyone back up now." No one listened. Fear jammed the air. A visitor tripped over a chair. A monitor toppled and shattered. The man reached the nurse's station and slammed his palm down hard enough to split plastic. Pens jumped, papers scattered. "Where did you hide it?" he roared, spittle flying. "You think I wouldn't notice?" Dr. Reed tried to assert himself, voice too loud, too sharp. "Sir, you're confused. You're injured. You need to calm down." The man turned his head slowly, looked at Reed. Really looked, his mouth curled, not in rage, but recognition. "You," he said. "You're lying." Reed stepped back. "Security!" The second guard rushed in. "Younger. Faster." He grabbed for the man's shoulder. The response was instant. The man pivoted, hooked an arm, and drove his weight forward. The guard went down hard, head striking tile. He didn't get back up. The room went silent in that awful way, that comes just before things break completely. Claire felt her pulse slow, not speed up, slow. Her breath dropped deep into her chest, controlled, practiced. She saw the man's stance now, the tension in his neck, the slight hitch in his left step. Pain there. Old pain. Susan's eyes found Claire across the room. "Claire," she whispered. Not a command, a plea. Claire stepped forward before she realized she had decided. "Sir," she said. Her voice cut through the noise cleanly. "Not loud." "Certain." The man's head snapped toward her. His gaze landed and stayed. Confusion flickered. Then anger. Then something else. Calculation. "What did you say?" he demanded. Claire stopped 6 feet away, close enough to matter, far enough to survive, maybe. "I said you're bleeding from the wrong place for the way you're moving." A beat. The room held its breath. "That head wound isn't what's hurting you," she continued. "It's your side. You're protecting it without realizing it." His jaw tightened. "You don't know me." "I know pain," Claire said quietly. "And I know when someone's lying to themselves." Behind her, Susan inhaled sharply. Dr. Reed stared, stunned, as if seeing Claire for the first time. The man took 1 step closer and smiled. "Then tell me," he said, voice dropping low, dangerous. "What else do you know?" Claire didn't answer right away. She watched the man's chest rise and fall, uneven, forced. The way his eyes kept flicking to the left, to the exits, to angles that didn't exist in civilian space. The way his hands never fully unclenched. "I know you're not here for help," she said. "And you're not here by accident." A murmur rippled through the room. Susan took a step forward, then stopped herself. Dr. Reed shook his head once, sharp, as if trying to wake from a bad dream. The man's smile thinned. "Careful," he warned. "People who guess wrong get hurt." Claire nodded, slow. People who guess wrong usually guess fast. She tilted her head, studying him. "You didn't." His brow creased. Anger flared, then stalled. "You talk like you think you're in control." "No," she said. "I talk like I know when no one else is." The air felt tighter now. Charged. Somewhere, a heart monitor beeped too fast, then corrected itself. The rain hammered the glass harder, as if leaning in to listen. Susan swallowed. "Claire," she said softly, "you don't have to do this." Claire didn't turn. "Yes, I do." The man took another step forward. 4 feet now. Too close. His voice dropped. "They told me not to trust anyone who sounds calm." "They told you a lot of things," Claire replied. "Some of them kept you alive. Some of them didn't." His eyes flashed. "You don't get to say that." "I do," she said, and for the first time, something cold slipped into her tone. "Because whoever sent you here didn't plan for you to bleed out in a hospital lobby. They planned for you to disappear." That landed. Hard. The man's breathing hitched. "Just once." "Who sent me?" he said slowly. doesn't make mistakes. Claire held his gaze. Neither do I. Behind the man, the automatic doors chimed softly as someone tried to badge in and failed. Locked. Security protocol engaged without announcement. Susan's phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't look at it. "Doctor." Reed wiped sweat from his upper lip, eyes darting between Claire and the man, calculating blame. The man laughed again. This time, there was no humor in it. "You're not afraid," he said. Claire exhaled through her nose. "I'm choosing not to be." He leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "Then you're the most dangerous person in this room." Claire didn't blink. "No," she said. "I'm the one who knows what happens next." Ooh. The sound came from the ceiling first, a dull metallic thud. Then another, like weight shifting where it shouldn't exist. The man's eyes snapped upward before anyone else noticed. His body reacted faster than his thoughts. He pivoted, planting his feet, shoulders angling toward the corridor as if bracing for impact. Instinct. Old. Burned deep. "Get down," he barked. No one moved. The second thud cracked louder. A ceiling tile split. Dust rained down. Somewhere above them, something heavy scraped, dragged, then stopped. Claire felt it then. Not fear. Recognition. Her jaw tightened. "That's not structural," she said quietly. "That's deliberate." Susan finally pulled her phone free. One glance at the screen drained the color from her face. "We're on internal lockdown," she whispered. "That didn't come from us." Dr. Reed scoffed, brittle. "This is a hospital, not a movie." The man laughed under his breath. "Hospitals are perfect," he said. "Everyone assumes safety." A sharp crack echoed from the east hallway. Glass shattered. A scream cut off mid-breath. The man turned fully now, back to Claire, eyes burning. "They found me." Claire's voice dropped. "They were never looking for you alone." He stared at her. Understanding crept in slow and ugly. "You're the variable." "Yes," she said. "And so are you." Boots thundered beyond the double doors, not rushed, coordinated, too clean, too quiet. Susan backed up, hand over her mouth. "Claire, what did you bring into my hospital?" Claire didn't answer. Her attention was on the man's injured side, the way his hand pressed harder now. Blood had soaked through his jacket, dark and spreading. "You don't have much time," she said. "Neither do they." He grinned, feral and grim. "Then stop talking." Claire stepped closer, close enough to smell iron and rain, and something burnt beneath it all. "If we move wrong," she said, "everyone here pays for it." His eyes flicked past her to the terrified room, then back. "Then tell me," he said, low and steady, "who you really are." Claire met his gaze without hesitation. "I'm the reason this doesn't end the way they planned." The first shot wasn't loud. It was precise. The glass panel at the end of the corridor burst inward, not shattered, punched. The sound came a half-second later, sharp and final. The man moved instantly, grabbing Claire by the wrist and yanking her sideways as another round tore through the nurse's station, splintering plastic and spraying paperwork into the air. "Down," he growled. They hit the floor together. Claire's shoulder slammed hard. She didn't cry out. Her breath stayed controlled, measured, even as alarms screamed and people scattered. Susan dropped behind a crash cart, shaking, hands over her head. Dr. Reed froze in the open, eyes wide, body locked between terror and disbelief. "This can't be happening," he whispered, to no one. The man peeked around the corner. Just enough. Too much. Another shot cracked, clipping the edge of the wall inches from his face. He pulled back, swearing under his breath. "They're professionals," he said. "They're herding us." Claire pushed herself up onto one elbow. "Toward the east stairwell," she said. "Dead angle. No cameras after the renovation." He stared at her. "You mapped this place." "I read reports," she said. "I don't improvise blind." Boots advanced, steady, unhurried. Voices low. Calm. Not police, not military. Something colder. Dr. Reed bolted. He didn't make it 3 steps. A round hit the floor in front of him, forcing him down. He screamed then, raw and animal. Claire's expression hardened. "They want witnesses compliant," she said. "Not dead, yet." The man tightened his grip on his side, blood seeping through his fingers. "I can't outrun them." "You don't have to," Claire said. She glanced at the stairwell door, then at the ceiling. "We don't go forward." He followed her gaze. Understanding flashed. "You're insane." "Yes," she replied calmly. "But I'm right." She met his eyes, steady, despite the chaos closing in. "You trust me for the next 60 seconds, she said. "Or everyone in this room dies." A beat. Gunfire echoed closer. He nodded once. "Do it." Claire reached for the fire suppression panel and pulled. The lights died, and the building breathed in. The sprinklers didn't activate. That was the first surprise. Instead, the emergency shutters slammed down halfway, metal grating screaming as it locked corridors into narrow throats of space. Red backup lights flickered on, bathing the ER in a dull, surgical glow. Smoke didn't fill the air. Silence did. Thick. Disorienting. The man let out a low breath. "You rerouted power." Claire was already moving. Old building, outdated redundancies. They never fixed the overrides. Boots skidded somewhere in the dark. A voice cursed. Another snapped an order, clipped, controlled. They weren't panicking. They were adjusting. Susan crawled toward the medication fridge, glassy-eyed. "Claire," she whispered, barely audible. "What are you doing?" Claire didn't slow. Buying time. She dragged a gurney sideways, wheels shrieking, blocking a corridor just as a shadow moved behind the shutter. A flashlight beam sliced through the gap, searching. The man stepped forward and ripped an oxygen tank from its cradle with a grunt, muscles screaming. He rolled it hard. Metal slammed. A startled shout. The beam vanished. Dr. Reed sobbed softly from where he crouched, hands over his ears. "This isn't my fault," he kept saying. "This isn't my fault." Claire glanced at him once. "It never is," she said flatly. She reached the supply cabinet and popped it open, fingers moving fast now. No hesitation. Gauze, tourniquet, syringe. Her hands were steady as she pressed the pad against the man's side. Blood soaked through immediately. "You should have let me die earlier," he muttered. She cinched the wrap tight. "They would have killed you slower." A shape loomed at the end of the hall. Too tall. Too still. The red light caught the outline of a rifle. The man shifted in front of Claire without thinking. Protective. Automatic. She touched his arm. "Don't," she said. "They're testing reactions." The shadow paused, then retreated. Claire exhaled. "They know I'm here now." He looked at her, pain etched deep but eyes clear. "Good." She met his gaze. "No," she corrected softly. "Necessary." The shutters rattled again. "Closer this time." And Claire finally allowed herself a thin, dangerous smile. "Now," she said, "we change the story." The building answered back with a sound like a throat clearing. Deep, mechanical. The freight elevator at the end of the East Hall chimed once, then opened. Claire didn't look surprised. "Basement," she said. "They won't expect us to go down." The man grimaced. "Basements are traps." "So are hallways," she replied, already pushing the gurney forward. "At least underground, sound lies." They moved fast now. Susan stayed behind with 2 patients, barricading a door with shaking hands. Dr. Reed didn't follow. He couldn't. His world had shrunk to a corner and a prayer. The elevator descended with a shudder. The lights flickered again, then steadied. The man leaned heavily against the wall, breathing through clenched teeth. "You planned this," he said, "not accusation. Awe." "I planned for contingencies," Claire answered. This was one of them. The doors opened into concrete and pipes and damp air. The hospital's underbelly. Storage. Laundry. Old records no one had digitized because no one wanted to remember what was down here. Footsteps echoed above them. Muffled. Hunting. Claire wheeled the gurney into a narrow service corridor and stopped. She reached up, fingers brushing a rusted valve. "They'll split," she said. 2 teams, one above, one below. He watched her. "You speak like you've seen this before." "I've seen the aftermath," she replied, and for the first time, something old and heavy slipped through her control. A flashlight beam cut through the dark behind them. Voices. Close. Claire twisted the valve hard. Steam roared into the corridor, white and blinding, screaming like something alive. The beam vanished. Someone shouted in pain. The man laughed, breathless. "You're enjoying this." "No," Claire said, eyes cold, focused. "I'm finishing it." She grabbed his arm. "When I say run, you don't argue." He nodded, bloodied grin sharp. "When you say run," he said, "I follow." Above them, the building groaned again, and somewhere in the dark, someone realized they were no longer in control. They didn't run. They advanced. Claire moved first, low and fast, feet silent on concrete, slick with condensation. The man followed, favoring his side but keeping pace, every step fueled by something sharper than adrenaline. The steam thinned in waves, revealing shapes, pipes, doors. A body on the ground, coughing, weapon dropped. Claire didn't look back. A voice cut through the dark. Calm, almost polite. Claire Nolan. You've complicated things. She stopped. Slowly. The man tensed behind her. A figure stepped into the red glow. Suit jacket. No helmet, no rush. Mid-50s, grey at the temples, eyes that assessed rather than reacted. He didn't carry a rifle. He didn't need to. I wondered how long you'd stay quiet, he continued. Hospitals were a clever choice. People assume you're harmless. The man snarled. Who is he? Claire exhaled. The cleanup. The man in the suit smiled thinly. That's unkind. I prefer problem resolution. He glanced at the injured man. You were never meant to make it this far. I never follow plans that don't include exits, Claire said. Still running, he said softly. You always were. The words landed heavier than gunfire. The man behind her shifted, confused. You know her. Yes, the man said, before she learned how to disappear. Footsteps echoed behind them now. Multiple, closing. The man in the suit raised a hand. Everything stopped, even the echoes. We can end this cleanly, he offered. You step aside. He comes with us. You go back to being invisible. Claire laughed once. Short. Bitter. You already tried that. She reached into her pocket and dropped something at his feet. A badge, old, bent, burned at the edges. His smile vanished. You buried this, she said, with people still breathing. Silence stretched. Then the man in the suit straightened. Kill them both, he said, voice flat. The first shot came from behind, and Claire finally turned fully toward the fire, eyes clear, unafraid. Too late, she whispered. The man moved before the second shot finished echoing. He surged forward, a wall of muscle and momentum, slamming into the first attacker and driving him into the concrete with a sound like breaking furniture. The gun skidded away. Claire was already moving the other direction, low, fast, hands steady as she scooped the fallen weapon and rolled behind a stack of crates. The man in the suit didn't flinch. He watched, calculated, adjusted. Contain, he said calmly. Boots thundered. Muzzles flashed. The basement filled with sharp light and concussive sound. Claire fired twice, controlled, forcing space rather than bodies. She wasn't trying to win. She was shaping the fight. The man took a round to the shoulder and barely slowed. He grabbed another attacker and used him as cover, shoving forward, rage burning clean and bright now. Not blind. Focused. Left! Claire shouted. He ducked just as a shot tore through the air where his head had been. They moved together without looking. A rhythm born under worse skies. The man in the suit stepped back, irritation finally cracking his composure. You should have stayed buried, he snapped at Claire. She popped up, gun steady. You should have finished your work. She fired. The round shattered a pipe behind him. Steam exploded again, hissing and blinding. Screams followed. Confusion bloomed. Claire sprinted through it, grabbing the man as his legs finally buckled. Blood soaked her sleeve. Warm. Heavy. "Stay with me," she ordered. Sirens wailed above them now. Real ones. Close. The man in the suit retreated into the smoke, voice fading. "This isn't over." Claire didn't answer. She dragged the man toward the service ramp, breath burning, body screaming but mind locked forward. As they burst into the cold night air, red and blue lights flooded the alley. The man collapsed against her, breath ragged. "You still think you're invisible?" he rasped. Claire tightened her grip. "No," she said softly. "I think I'm done hiding." The alley smelled like rain, oil, and copper. Police flooded in fast, shouting commands that overlapped and contradicted each other. Weapons up, then down, then up again. Claire raised her hands slowly, one still braced against the man's back to keep him upright. He was fading now. The fight had burned through what little was holding him together. A senior officer pushed through the line, grey hair plastered to his forehead, eyes sharp despite the chaos. He took in the scene in seconds. The blood. The shattered door behind them. The way Claire positioned her body between the man and everyone else. "Ambulance!" he barked. "Now!" Paramedics rushed forward, cutting the jacket away, hands working fast. The man grimaced, then relaxed, trusting them just enough to let go. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, his fingers brushed Claire's wrist. "They'll lie," he murmured. "They always do." Claire leaned close. "So will I." His mouth twitched. Then his eyes closed. The officer turned to her. "Ma'am, I need you to stay right here." She nodded. "Of course." Behind him, unmarked vehicles idled at the mouth of the alley. Dark windows, engines running, watching. The officer followed her gaze. Something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or instinct. "You didn't run," he said quietly. "Most people would have." Claire looked back toward the hospital. Smoke still curled from a broken vent. Sirens layered over each other, distant and near. "Most people weren't given much of a choice," she said. He studied her a beat longer, then lowered his voice. "If you walk away now," he said, "I can honestly say I never saw you." Claire met his eyes, held them. "That's all I need." She stepped back as the stretcher rolled past, rain soaking her hair, her clothes, washing the blood into the gutter. No one stopped her. No one called her name. By the time the alley emptied, Claire Nolan was already gone, folding herself back into the city like she had never existed at all. 6 months later, the city kept moving as if nothing had happened beneath Mercy Harbor. Construction crews replaced shattered glass. Administrators issued statements about isolated incidents and improved protocols. Names were never spoken out loud. Files went missing. Stories softened at the edges. That was how the system healed itself. The man lived, slowly, with scars that pulled when it rained, and a limp he would never quite shake. He disappeared into a federal hospital under a different name, guarded by paperwork thicker than walls. Some nights he woke convinced the lights were still red and the air still full of steam, and every time he did, he remembered the woman who stood still when everyone else ran. Claire Nolan never returned to the hospital. She didn't take credit. She didn't clear her name. She didn't correct the version of events that painted her as a bystander who got lucky. She crossed state lines, changed routines, blended back into a country full of quiet people carrying loud pasts. Somewhere along the way, restraint loosened its grip. Not gone. Just lighter. Power rarely announces itself. It waits. It watches. And when it moves, it does so without apology. If this story stayed with you, show your support by hitting like and subscribing for more stories where silence hides strength. And if you have something to say, drop a comment below with 3 words. I was there.